Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lead More podcast. Today, I want to offer a different perspective on how to do a sales call. If you're a leader, an entrepreneur, solopreneur, if you're just trying to get someone to help somebody versus to buy something, right? When you hear sales call, nobody wants that. No one wants to book a sales call. Nobody wants to be sold to. We can all picture when I say sales guy, sort of like the most kind of annoying person you can think of, right? And that's a generalization, but that's where our head goes. And so we don't want to be sold to. So today I bring on my friend, John Meese. Now, John Meese is a coach. He's actually a coach of coaches. So I went through his program. He helps coaches like myself sell out their programs. And one of his important tactics is by going through his book called Serve to Sell. Serve to Sell is a way to show up and add value. Show up to a coffee meeting, a Zoom call, a lunch conversation, and to ask some pointed strategic questions that let the person talk, that let them, tell their story, let them tell you what they've tried and sort of be vulnerable. And then you can offer value with just some good questions without selling, by just asking these good questions, pointing them in the right direction. And so I'm going to ask John to go through the full framework and break it out. There's 7 R's to the framework. And by the end of this episode, you'll be on your way to sort of tweaking or adjusting the way you might do a sales call, and maybe even rebranding that to a serve call and adding value to your customers. So John's a friend of mine. He knows his stuff, and you'll find that very clear on this episode. So with that, let's go to John Meese. Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Lead More. I'm here with my friend, John Meese. We got John Meese, we got John Meyer. How you doing today, John?
Doing really well. Yeah, we figured that out at one point, that it was like, no, I'm John M. Oh, I'm John M. Okay, yeah, like you have to go a couple letters in before you find the difference in our name.
Yeah, it's a whole thing, but
yeah.
But I'm glad you're here today, and I've had the fortunate pleasure of getting to work with you a lot this summer, and then we just got to meet in IRL, which is always fun in this digital world that we live in. And so today I'm really excited to talk about serve calls. Tell me, when did you first get the idea to write this book, or sort of like, did you kind of back into this idea, or did you construct this idea?
Well, I mean, the book is a written version of basically a technique that I developed with my clients over a period of several years. So writing the book was sort of like the natural conclusion of like, right, we should just write this down. But the genesis of it actually started when I was just really frustrated, as many things do. Like I started my business and I didn't really get a lot of training in the stuff that I did, but I knew you're supposed to do these like discovery calls. People call them different things, right? Discovery call. I call mine a strategy session because I'm clever. We all have these like names, like free coaching call, discovery. Sometimes you call it a sales call, but you've got like a, sometimes it's a compass call, whatever it is. You've got like a free conversation with someone before they become a client for like consulting or coaching or high ticket stuff. And I was doing that, but I really just like kind of hated it. And I didn't like who I was on those calls. And so I started kind of backing up because I believe words matter. And I was like, okay, why do I feel so much pressure like before I even start talking on those calls? And I realized it was because in my head, even if it had a clever name, it was a sales call. Mm-hmm. And John, what do you call a sales call where you don't make a sale?
A failure.
Yeah, a failure. So I set it up before the conversation even starts as a pass fail. And for most people on the planet, that means if you're setting up a sales call if you don't make a sale, it's a failure. You're going to fail most of the time because most people have a conversion rate that's less than 50%. Or, so it's like, that just sounds like bad design, right? Like high pressure, high stakes, stressful. And I learned all kinds of techniques, but that didn't really take that away emotionally. So for me, the idea of what's in the book Serve to Sell started as me just renaming it. Like before there was a structure at all, of me just saying, well, what if I call it a serve call instead? Where every single time I meet with somebody, the goal is to serve them, for them to walk away and go, wow, that was amazing. And yes, let's do that in such a way that it leads to a sale. But even if it doesn't, let's make sure that both parties walk away grateful for the experience. And that's how it started.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. You had a line in the book that I guess I would consider this like an audit. Like if you're trying to ask yourself, am I doing serve calls or am I doing sales calls? There's that line that's like, do you finish up the small talk and then say, all right, now let's jump into it. Like I can't remember exactly how you said that. And it's that idea of like, we've all been there, right? Where we feel like, okay, hard stop, small talk, get to know
Yep.
you. Now starts the pitch
Now
process.
I got to change now I have to change identities, right? That's usually what that is people, because people, your people do that. You'll be on a call with somebody and be like talking about the wife and the kids or the, the dog or whatever. And then you're like, all right, let's get to business. And like you said, like that's a transition point where like what you just said was like, that conversation is over and now you get sales me.
Well, and I was always coached, like, when it comes to sales, the yeses make us money. The no's save us money. It's sort of the maybes that you want to avoid, right?
Oh,
and so if you actually take I'm here to serve approach, maybe it's just not a fit right now. But you still want to, like, you don't want to burn a bridge. You still want to offer value. You want to be seen positively.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have people I meet with who, by the end of the call, either they or me realize it first, but eventually we both realize they're not a good fit. But they still walk away going, "This is super useful to me." And then all the time I get referrals from people who like, "Hey, I met with John." Can you imagine that? Like if that happened for a sales call? I met with John for a sales call 2 weeks ago and I didn't buy his thing. You should go to his sales call. Like that doesn't happen, right? I've been to those 8-hour timeshare presentations to get you the cruise that you accidentally opted into. That's the extreme version of like trapped in sales. This is more like someone gets off a serve call and they're like, "Who else can I send? This is amazing. Hey, my guy John might give you a free coaching call if you ask nicely. You should talk."
Yeah, that's great. And so I think you kind of, instead of going into the goal of how do I make money, it's how do I add value in 45 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever it might be.
Exactly. So. Exactly. Yeah. And and that's really a continuation of my previous book, is just called Always Be Teaching, which is just the core idea that everything you do in sales and marketing should be teaching. And so like someone walks away from it smarter, wiser, they've learned something. And so this is just sort of the more developed iteration of that, of like one specific way that shows up.
So you help coaches sell out their coaching program, which is how I found you. But I think this concept of a serve call can apply to lots of entrepreneurs and lots of business owners. The idea of jumping on a phone call and adding value. So what we're going to do today for the Lead More listeners is actually walk through. I do recommend you download the book. It's a quick, easy read. But we're going to walk through the framework of what a serve call looks like and the different functions. So let's start at the top and we'll break down the framework.
Yeah, happy to. If you're, it's helpful if you can follow the visual, because I'll talk it through, but it's always like, it's like a lot of detail. Like you can go buy this book, but you can also just get it for free because I like John. And so therefore I like you listening to this. So you can go to servetosellbook.com/leadmore, and then you can get a free copy of the book and you can follow along if you want.
Yeah, so I guess if you are, you can get that immediately. So you could pause now. We'll put that in the show notes and then follow along.
Okay, so there's 6 steps to the serve call. They're not necessarily sequential, at least for the first 4. But it helps for me I think it's helpful to kind of keep them as a guide. But okay, the first one is establish the relationship. Well, or it's just the word relationship is kind of how it starts. That's your first goal. Now, that doesn't mean you establish a relationship and then you're done with that, right? Like it's like you got to find common ground. Is the common ground that you have kids about the same age? Is it that you like looked at their website and you love something about their business? Is it that you have similar health goals? Is it that you both know this woman named Natalie who did something cool? What is that one like shared common ground that you have that you could bond with someone around? That's really critical that you find in the first 2 minutes. If you don't, a lot of people show up to these calls and they sort of got their guard up, like they're expecting it to be a pitch. And so they walk in and they've kind of already got their like fists up. They kind of like you can usually tell like their shoulders are tight. They're kind of like, "Hey, yeah, good to connect with you. What's the deal? Let's go." And if you take the bait and you just like go into it, like you will not have a good experience because they'll have their defenses up the whole time. So you need to disarm them. So I've had this before where like I realized like later on in a call, like we didn't quite do this, and I'll kind of circle back and just like, "Well, tell me more about like where you're from." And so with one woman I was meeting with, I could just tell her guard was up, and I had to spend like all this time asking about her family, where she's from, all this kind of stuff, before I figured out that she grew up in the U.S. Virgin Islands, which are not too far from Puerto Rico, where I had just got back from living for a year. And then we find out, okay, her son was born in a Puerto Rican hospital a couple hours from where I live. We found literal common ground.
Cool.
Once we found that, the whole conversation changed. We're not talking about her son. We're not talking about Puerto Rico, but we found common ground. Right. And so then like her posture changed. She smiled more. She was more your relationship changes once that happens. So that's first, is relationship.
So I bet you can almost physically tell when you get that common ground just by the way their body language or their face. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, you can. I mean, everybody's personality is different of like how much they volunteer that, but
Sure.
yes, you can usually tell, especially once you do more of these serve calls, you're like, okay, this is still, I like to think of it as a shopping call when they're on the defensive still. I'm like, oh, they're here for a shopping call. We need to change the dynamic.
Sure.
I want it to feel like a conversation you would have with a friend at a coffee shop, sitting down at a table across from them, not at the bar. Right? Because if John, if like we run into each other at a coffee shop and we haven't talked in a year or two, it's going to be like, hey, how's it going?
It's great. Yeah, it's
Cool.
Glad to catch up.
Good. What are you working on these days?
Well, I'm working on selling out my coaching program, No More Solo. So yeah, I'm helping entrepreneurs double their monthly revenue.
That's awesome. Well, good luck with that. That's the end of the conversation when you run into someone at the coffee bar, right? Like that's as deep as it goes. But when you want to, what I want to do is I want to take that conversation and I want to go over and sit down at the tables across from each other and I want to go deeper. And that's a really critical for like just the posture to have in a serve call.
Yeah. And you kind of have like in your book, I know you have a little bit like a prompt question. So for the relationship category, you say, what's on your mind? Is that one that you like? You've had good luck with?
I have like, honestly, the core goal is more important than what question you ask of like, the goal is establish a relationship, but my go-to question is what's on your mind. It's a great way to just open it up. My other favorite for that one is where you're from, which I love that John Maxwell says that it's the best opening line because people can answer it as where they were born, where they grew up, where they currently live, or where they just traveled from. And so it gives you a chance to like them, like, it's like, where you're from. You're like, oh, I just flew in from Orlando. It's like, or like, it's a really great opening line.
Yeah. I always use that one in networking and I've always thought of it as like, if they say South Dakota, then I'm probably going to ask a personal question about their family or what they like to do there. And sometimes they might say lead more, or, they might say their company name is where they're from. So then it kind of feels like, okay, we're going to talk about work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that one. Where are you from?
Yeah, that's great. So the next three, they honestly work. These are the ones that kind of mingle the most, which is results, roadblocks, and resources. Okay. So this is essentially just a 3-dimensional view of understanding someone's situation. So results, the question here is, what's your most important goal right now? Roadblocks, how's that going so far? And resources, what have you tried before today? But what typically happens is these don't happen sequentially necessarily. So you start at the top with where are you from or what's on your mind, and you say like, what's on your mind? And they're like, oh, hey, and you start chatting, and they're like, by the way, I really want to talk to you about this thing that I want to do because it's not going the way I wanted to do, even though I tried this other thing over here. And so usually like people will volunteer results, resources, and roadblocks immediately, and kind of all at once.
So we should make the assumption they've probably booked this serve call off of maybe a newsletter email or a social media post or an email exchange, right? Something like that. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's obviously like they agreed to show up in the first place. Yeah. We need to, how they got there. There's a lot of different ways, but it's just like any other sort of free call, like a strategy call or consult. It might be that you have a page on your website where someone can link to click it. And this, I have to make sure we say this. I never call it a serve call publicly, right? Like no one is like booking a serve call because they don't know what that is.
They don't know what it means. Yeah,
exactly.
Until this thing goes viral and everybody
I was gonna say,
right?
I have the problem now where almost everybody I meet with a serve call has already read the book, and so it's like
oh crap, you're selling me.
No, but I'll have people tell me, like, I'll ask them a question, they'll be like, this is so good. It's like, I can see you using your own book on me, so it happens almost every serve call now. But I still call it a complimentary coaching call, is what I call it publicly. Yeah. It's like, hey, and it's like, for me, it's like, you can't just go on my website and do that. Like, I have to, like, we email back and forth, and then I say, like, hey, I think I can help you. Would you like to book a free coaching call? Like, that's typically how that is. But other people, it's like a button on their website. In a previous version of this, when I first got started with serve calls, it was actually me reaching out to people and inviting them. But what I would say is like, hey, can we chat sometime? I'd love to learn more about your goals. I want to learn more about your goals to see if or how I can help you. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of like my go-to for direct outreach.
And maybe to be clear for listeners, the people I would imagine you would say the people these work best for are folks who are probably selling 4, maybe even 5-figure services, right? So a coach, a consultant, an agency. This isn't like buy my $29 PDF download and let's talk about it for an hour first.
Well, so serve calls, they are market research coaching conversations that lead to a sale. Mm-hmm. So because they're market research, they're valuable for all of your products. But the reality is like, yes, as Paul Graham said, do things that don't scale. But you also got to do the math and make some money, right? And so you can't just fill your calendar with calls where you have a 30% chance of selling a $20 ebook. Like it's just like bad math.
Yeah.
So I do think it's best if you have a premium program that you can sell. But actually, I have a great example there where just this happened on Friday, where I was looking at the software that's called Magpie. And it's an assessment tool, right? It's just like there's a lot of these out there, like quiz tools and things like that you can use to make surveys or quizzes. And I was really interested in some of their examples. And they really kind of through their funnel directed me towards like booking a call with a strategist. And so I met with them. And they didn't follow the serve call structure exactly. They hadn't read the book yet. They've actually already got the book now. But this is a software that costs like, $50 or $100 a month. But what they did was genius. On the call, they diagnosed my situation. They gave me some feedback and support direction. And then Jane, she's actually the owner of the company, she on the call, she then sold me on the call a $2,000 sales acceleration bundle, which I paid on the call. It was beautifully executed. And basically what they're doing right now, as you and I are talking, is her team is building out an assessment funnel for me. So like they're like, it's like, yes, this includes 3 months of access to the software, but it also includes them saying, hey, we've already got best practices from 6 years of like however many tens of thousands of assessments that people have used to sell high ticket services. And so we'll just use that plus your content and we'll personalize and make your own bundle of quizzes and assessment tools for your clients. And we'll have it done by Tuesday. And I was like, done. Like, so they took a software SaaS product and they turned it into a premium program. And now, like, once that's done, do you think I'm going to take that to another quiz platform? Like, they probably got me for life. Like they just,
well, and especially in software, I don't know if you use another tool or not, but like the hardest challenge or objection is usually like switching costs, right? I got to move my data. I got to move my information. I got to set it up, just
well, that's the thing too, is I do use another quiz platform. And they're like, do you have any other quizzes right now? And they're like, send us a link. We'll just incorporate that into this assessment funnel. So it completely replaces it. And it was great. I got to have a little behind the scenes talk with Jane, the founder, and just about this. And she was like, well, in software, like a big problem is always time to value. Like how soon after you start using our software do you actually get a meaningful value in your business? And she was like, we can do assessments for anything, but if I can help you build a sales focused assessment that's going to help you sell a high ticket program, now we're indispensable. And so like they zeroed in on that one problem and they built a high ticket offer around it, which has this kind of halo effect of growing all of their SaaS business. Isn't that cool?
That's really cool. Yeah. You get immediate value and then paying whatever the monthly software product feels probably pretty cheap.
Yeah, I actually don't even know what the monthly is, but I've already committed to it. It's like I'm sure it's on their website. like it was less than 1,000, more than 50, but I don't remember. It's like, but I'm already in. Like at this point, I'm just like, yeah.
So I understand how results, roadblocks, and resources talked about how you said they're very interchangeable. Talk to us about that.
Well, by interchangeable, I don't mean like you can, if you're like, oh, I know a lot about the results, I don't know about the roadblocks. What I mean is the sequence they happen. So you'll ask someone like, hey, what's your most important goal right now? And they might say, well, I'm trying to grow my income. So that, well, here's a good example. I met with someone recently who was just like, it's like my most important goal right now is to add $5,000 a month to the business. Because if I can do that for 3 months in a row, where I have an extra $5,000 I'm generating, that allows my wife to quit her job as a teacher where she's getting burnout and she feels really trapped. And in my current model, I'm kind of maxed out. And so actually, I'm not sure exactly how I would add $5,000 a month because I can't fit another, 3 clients into my calendar. So what they just told you was like the results. It's like what the result they want is, well, John, you tell me, like, what did you hear in that in terms of results, resources, roadblocks? Because you're familiar with this model. What are the results that you heard in that? Yeah.
Yeah, I heard not the easy one, just more revenue, right?
Yeah.
5K more revenue. But really what they're asking for is like freedom, sort of like freedom for his spouse, freedom for maybe the family, like that peace of mind, that consistent revenue probably.
Yeah.
And also then an answer of how to do it without.
Yeah. So what about roadblocks? Yeah.
So the roadblocks I think was sort of that feeling of like, well, I would love 5K more a month, but how would I manage that?
Yeah. So that's, And then also the fact that the wife, I mean, honestly, this is a little bit trapped. Like, this might not be as obvious, but the wife that like, my wife hates her job and she's like heading towards burnout. That's a roadblock. It's like, that's a drain on the family, on the business, on life.
Yeah. Stress on the marriage. Yeah, for sure.
Stress on the marriage. And then, I don't think about it. Oh yeah. What about resources? I know I mentioned one of that might be surprising, but yeah.
Yeah. So your resources, what have you tried before? And resources is about like your experience, your expertise, maybe people you might
Yeah.
know, right?
Or in this case, this example, he already has a maxed out calendar of one-on-one clients.
So he's got
That's
leads.
a resource. Yeah.
Or he's
So
got
that means he
existing
does not have a
clients.
lead. He doesn't have a problem with leads or sales, right?
Yep.
It's just a business model problem. So some of that's not obvious at first glance. Like you have to kind of like think about it and kind of like do the like understand whatever your specific thing is that you're trying to solve for. But for me, like I hear that and I'm like, oh, cool. So if I can teach you how to restructure that into a group offer and to do that at scale, like we're good.
So it's almost like with roadblocks and resources, you sort of get, I think of roadblocks as like a barrier, a negative that we need to eliminate. And then resources is like an opportunity or an asset that maybe we just need to unleash.
That is exactly right. And sometimes it's a plot twist. Like the resources is the one that like honestly takes a little bit more, I guess, effort and intention to find, because roadblocks is easy. If you ask anybody their goal, they almost always tell you a result in a roadblock. Like they very rarely do you tell someone like, what's your most important goal right now? And they're like, pay off debt. What they'll say is like, pay off debt because, you know, like we had some medical crisis with our kids and they ended up at the hospital. They justify it. And so that, or you say like, what's your most important goal right now? It's like grow revenue. They're going to tell you something more like they're going to pair a roadblock with that. Like, lose weight, for example. You're like, what's the most important goal right now with your physical health? It's like, well, I want to lose weight because, you know, like I'm a busy dad. I got 4 kids. Like I don't have time to like do a bunch of like workout regimes. Like CrossFit looks cool, but like, man, I don't know about that. I used to do jujitsu, but then I like broke my ankle. All true stories for me, by the way. But, so like people don't usually leave out roadblocks unless I don't know why they would. They just don't, you know, generally. That may not be emotionally healthy, but that's true.
I imagine the one objection you get to the serve call framework is people who maybe feel like it's rigid or like, oh, I have to follow this roadmap. Or so tell me how you answer the like, maybe I start to scrape away at like the relationship, but they're still a little guarded and they're just like, so what are you selling? You know, like get to the point, like get to the pitch. How do you answer that person on a serve call? You back up and be like, no, I got to ask these other questions first.
Yeah, what I'll tell them is like, oh yeah, if you want my help, happy to talk about that. But first, I want to make sure I understand your situation. I mean, it's sort of like going into a doctor's office and saying like, give me antibiotics, and you're like, okay, what are your symptoms? Like, I know, like you know, or give me steroids. Like you walk in the doctor's office, you're like, give me steroids. He's like, okay, now definitely sit down.
Yeah.
I need to ask some questions, right? So you want to have that posture of like, you're diagnosing the situation. You can't give them medicine just because they want it. And they probably don't actually want it if they're saying that. Like if they're saying like, what, are you just going to give me drugs? You're like, well, let me understand your situation better first. You know, like let's back up. So
I got to actually look in your ear before I give you antibiotics.
Exactly. Yeah. It's that idea. It's really more of like a prescriptive approach. There are doctors that you can just pay to get steroids and they don't have a opening appointment, but that's like a whole other business
different
model.
Kind of doctor.
Yeah, it's a different kind of, So I was going to say, resources. Okay, the plot twist. Sometimes it's a plot twist. Like, for example, the example that I just gave a minute ago, it sounds all bad. Like, the guy's like, I'm maxed out. I can't take any more clients, but I don't grow my income. Like, you as the expert have to look at that and be like, oh, there's actually a hidden resource in there, which is that you have a maxed out calendar and you have a one-on-one coaching business. Like, that means you must have a lot of clients who are paying you money. So we can go deeper on that. And now we can ask like, okay, well, how many clients can you support at a given time? You know, like, I've had a client before who like literally was like, I don't have time, see? And did share screen and showed me his calendar. And it was like, and I was like, I was overwhelmed by many things. One of which was he had a maxed out calendar where every single client had a 30-minute appointment. And I was like, can you imagine how many clients that is? Like every day was booked with 30-minute back-to-back appointments Monday through Friday.
Meeting, yeah.
I was like, but that's a huge resource, right? It doesn't look like that.
Should you charge more? Could you do a group coaching and put them together? Yeah, lots of opportunities. Yeah.
So, so those are those 3.
Okay.
So the key
you
here,
called it kind of a triad. I heard you call it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like a 3-dimensional view of like results, roadblocks, and resources. Once you feel like you have kind of hit an emotional nerve in each of those, like then ideally you want to like bold that in your notes or just highlight like whatever matters most. Like the example I gave earlier, the guy who's like, yeah, he wants to add $5,000, but like it's not just for the money. Like it's why does that matter? Because like his wife is going to burn out in this job and he really wants to retire his spouse. You know, like that's...
Yep. It's personal.
Yeah, it's personal. So then you get to the recap. Now, I will say this is where most people are like, now I get to give them advice, right? Like I get to tell them all the solutions to their problems. And like the hardest part of this is no.
Wait.
If you really want to help them, you have to wait. You have to hold it back. But you ask, what is your most useful takeaway from today's call so far? That's the recap. So when you ask the recap question, what is your most useful takeaway from today's call so far? Just a few things. One, it causes the person you're talking to activate the part of their brain that reflects. So now they reflect back on your conversation up until this point. And it's scary to ask this question when you first do serve calls because part of you is like, I haven't told them anything yet. So I'm like, what's your most useful takeaway? And I haven't actually given any advice. But people will tell you, like the example I just gave, like he'll say something like, he's like, I knew growing my business was important, but until we started talking about it, I didn't really realize like in my current model, it's just impossible. But something has to change because I don't know how much longer my wife and I can keep going with what we got going on right now.
Yep.
And so they're just realizing like the stakes are high. Like, and who knows what the useful takeaway is? It's up to them. But so that's one thing it does. It gets them to reflect. That causes them to transfer that information to their long-term memory. So more likely to retain what they just learned by talking with you and credit you accordingly. Right. They also, on top of that, it activates the reciprocity effect. If you're not a sociopath, it means the reciprocity effect is active in your brain because you're trained from birth to know that if someone gives you something, you should give them something back. Mm-hmm. This is why a lot of people are uncomfortable with charity. But it's also why at this point of the call, I say receiving charity is what I mean. A lot of people are uncomfortable receiving charity. It's because you're like, no, I have to give something back, right? Like, I don't know how this works. So the same thing goes when someone just said like, well, here's this awesome thing you just gave me. Immediately they have this physical need to give back to you. And that's the right time for you to introduce your recommendation where you say, I believe I can help you. Would you like me to share how? Mm-hmm. And that's the first step of the triple yes recommendation.
Yeah. Talk about this because this is good. Okay. This is like real sales psychology when you come to the triple yes.
Yes. The triple yes recommendation starts with, I believe I can help you. Would you like me to share how? So that's a really simple yes. It's permission to pitch is what it is. Mm-hmm. So then what you need to do is you need to transition to the second question. And by the way, up until now, how you phrase the question was not that important as long as you accomplish the objective. Like you got a relationship, you got results, resources and roadblocks, you got the recap. This is where it really, really matters of like how you phrase the question. So I believe I can help you. Would you like me to share how? And then correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you really want is this key result. And I can clearly see that you have these key resources and I'd love to help you remove this key roadblock. Does that sound like a good fit so far? All you're doing at this point is you're basically practicing active listening by mirroring back to them what you heard them say. When you do this, even though you're just copy and paste, like repeating back to them what they said, consistently people have this reaction where they're like, oh my gosh, it's like you can read my mind. Like, that's crazy. That's exactly, yes, that does sound like a good fit. That's exactly what I want. So I said yes twice.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Humans love patterns of three. And so again, reciprocity effect plus 2 yeses, whatever question you ask next, every bone in their body wants to say yes. And so that's the time when you say, excellent. I have a program that's designed to insert promise, and I'd love to have you join. Is that something you'd like to do? So for me, just to give an example, this is where I would say, excellent. I have a program that's designed to help you earn $10,000 per month, group coaching 90 minutes per week. Is that something you'd like to do?
I'm already nodding, just listening.
Yeah. So, I guess, John, what are the kind of, obviously you know the serve call framework, so you know how this works and why this works, but what are the kind of things that I didn't say anywhere in the recommendation that you would typically expect to be at this point in a sales call, if not a serve call?
Yeah. Price, like jumping right to the price, like
didn't mention the price,
the timeline, maybe like can I follow up or I'll send you a proposal, like all these other things that just slow down the whole process.
Exactly.
And you just asked for a very, like, it didn't seem like I was buying. It was seeming like I was like opting in, choosing to get.
Do you want to do this? Yeah, exactly. You've already said you want my help. You've already said this is your situation. And now I'm saying I can solve that with this medicine, basically like this, that's a whole other thing. Medicine versus cure is a whole other framework. I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail right now, but the specifically saying like, do you want to be cured? You're like, yeah, I do. Now, most people, their answer to that last question is yes, but. Because I say like, hey, I have a program designed to help you earn $10,000 per month, group coach 90 minutes per week. Is that something you'd like to do? And John, can you think of some examples of what that might be if I asked you that, what your yes buts might be?
Yeah, you're like, but what's the catch? But what's the cost? But
Yeah.
let me talk to my wife. But let
Yeah.
me get back. Yeah, stall tactics or
Yeah,
things like
yeah.
that.
Sometimes it's stall tactics for sure, but also sometimes it's like legitimate. Like, wait a minute. Like, usually there's a little bit of surprise because people are kind of at this point expecting me to pull out the super slick pitch deck or the sales page with like all the bonuses, and I'm just like, do you want to do this? And they're like, well, yeah, but when does it start? I'm like, it starts on Thursday. Would you like to join?
What time? Yeah.
I said 3 p.m. Central. You're in Pacific, right? That's 1 p.m. for you. Does that work for you? Yeah, but how much does it cost? It's $1,000 a month. But you can just pay $500 right now, and that saves your seat and gets you enrolled in the program. You want to go ahead and get started? And you just keep coming back. This is what's referred to as a client-led close, where you're using questions to get people to tell you their objection. So if I were to launch into a whole sales spiel of all the details about my program, you're likely to introduce objections, right? So typically what people do here is they're like, cool, I have this group coaching program. It's 6 weeks long, which seems short, but it's actually the perfect length. And it's 90 minutes a week on Thursday afternoons. It's on Zoom. Unless you like Microsoft Teams, but we're actually still gonna be on Zoom. I don't know why I said that. And it's $5,000 unless you want to do like 3 payments of like $1,250 plus like a $2,000 deposit. Like people just like, I mean, obviously I'm like kind of exaggerating it, but this is like normally, this is normally what happens there.
Usually, it's like just stop talking and you get the close.
So what happens is you introduce objections the more you say at this point. So instead, what you do is you let them tell you what the objection is. Now, if you ask the question, this has only ever happened to me once, maybe twice, where I said, hey, I have a program that's designed to do this thing. Is that something you'd like to do? And they were like, yes. And the first time it happened, I was like, well, great. And they're like, cool, we're done. Well, I'm in. And I was like, just so taken aback that I was like, okay. And they're like, yeah. And then I don't even know how we ended the call. They did not join. They did not join. No way. No. They didn't really know what they were saying yes to, right?
And you didn't really know what you were selling.
Yeah. I think at that time, this was early enough in my career that I think also I wasn't taking a deposit on the call. So I'm in, just send me the access info. Done. And I was like, sweet. But then, of course, I sent them the detail, and they never paid the invoice. So the second time it happened to me like that, where somebody was like, "Yes," I was like, "Amazing! Are you ready to enroll right now?" And they were like, "Well, okay. All right. So tell me what's the cost?"
Yeah.
Right. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to get them to tell you what is the one objection that's keeping them from saying yes. And sometimes you eliminate that objection. There's another one, but then you just say you come back to the decision question.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to do that. Like, what would it be worth to you if I could solve your problem? Like, what's your currently monthly revenue if I can double that? Like, you can show them the ROI pretty quickly, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. So people ask, well, even then, I also think of the triple yes recommendations being part of this yes ladder. That the first 3 yeses are just part of that question of yes, I want you to tell me how to help you or how you can help me. Yes, you have a good snapshot of my situation, and yes, I want to join your program, but I have this other question. Well, the next yes after that is, would you pay a deposit right now? That's where we want to go. We're not trying to get them to pay in full for whatever it is. It's yes, would you pay a deposit? Yes. John, when you joined my program, you actually paid in full, but on the call, you paid a deposit. Yeah. And then I emailed you the next, an hour later, and I was like, cool, sweet, here's the information to finish your enrollment, and then you paid in full. Yep. So some clients do a payment plan, some pay in full, but that's actually the next decision, right? So it's and now actually the way I do it is when people ask me the pricing, I only tell them the payment plan. And then what I do now is I'm the yes ladder is pay the deposit. And then if they ask how much it costs, I just tell them it's $1,000 a month for 6 months. And then they say yes to that. Then I send them the enrollment information. And as part of that, I say, oh, by the way, there's an extra option there. You do save a bit if you pay in full, but payment plan's still there, whichever choice. It's up to you.
Smart.
Yeah. So we could go into more of that too, but so what's your experience with surf calls, John? I know you've kind of introduced this as part of what you teach too now, which I love.
Yeah. And, you coach coaches. I coach agency owners or creatives, entrepreneurs. And I think, we used to do, or they still do, we called them clarity calls at Lemonly because we were selling not a JPEG. We were making you a JPEG, but we were giving you clarity. And so we were trying, some of this really resonated, right? What have you tried? What's on your mind? What resources we're asking, we're trying to push on the pain and figure out the problem. Yeah. And then essentially, if we could give you clarity. So I think like I said, we did parts of this, but I love your R's and the framework of how it just kind of buttons it up nicely. So I think what has shifted for me since I discovered this framework from you is just this if I can get off the phone and know that I gave you value, I feel a good sense that if it's not now, then later, right? Like you eventually will be right for my program, even if it's not today. And I let them know, like, hey, not only is my program going to get better, it's also going to get more expensive, probably. So it's it's just sort of that, like, there's a little bit of that urgency, sense of urgency, but they've gone well. Like, I actually don't really get no's. Sometimes it's just a not right now. Which that's a whole nother kind of objection to address, but.
Yeah, well, and we probably don't have time to get into too much detail right now, but I'll just say in the book, I also cover the 4 levels of objections that you want to overcome. Mm-hmm. And that can tell you a lot based on where someone eventually says no, like a not right now. If it's a not right now, there's different kinds of not right now, right? Like if it's a fully informed not right now, sometimes that literally means it's like, yes, I want your thing. Yes, I believe you can help me. Yes, I believe it's worth my money and time. There's just this other thing going. Like I had 2 clients this summer who want to join. They're like, this is weird that I had 2 clients doing this, but I'm literally in the middle of moving from the West Coast to the East Coast by U-Haul. And I was like, they're like, my life is gone for the next 6 weeks. It's like,
I don't miss half the calls. Yeah.
I was like, no, I can't help you there. Like that's like, I don't have a crusher for that objection. But the 4 levels though, the first is desire. That's why you asked that question, like the way it's designed that way of saying like, hey, would you like this promise? Would you like this result? It's meant to test desire. Do they want it? The next level after that is of objections. This is sequential. This is consistently how people make decisions. First is desire. Do they actually want the thing? So sometimes when I say not right now, you can tell it's like because they're like, I'm actually not interested in the thing that you're selling, right? I don't actually want that, right? It's not, if they say it's not a good time, but they haven't actually asked you when it started, like when the start date is, they may just not be interested. So desire is the first level, and then credibility, which is, do you know what you're talking about? Like, are you actually a credible source of information on this authority? Believability is next after that, which is, sure, you are a credible source, but can you help me in my unique situation as a special snowflake with my own problems? Because I'm not like everybody else. So believability is the last one. So it's like credibility is, can you help? Believability is, can you help me? And the last one is scarcity, which is it worth my precious money and time? Mm-hmm. And so that ideally, if someone's asking scarcity questions and you can tell that's where they're stuck, that actually tells you they already passed 3 tests: desire, credibility, and believability, which is super helpful.
Yeah, and another example of like, don't go back to those if they've already kind of escalated, if they've moved up the ladder, like then just address the one they're asking. Don't have to address the others.
Exactly. So if somebody's asking like, okay, money, oh man, I'm really busy right now. And you're like, well, I helped this other guy over here do this amazing thing. Like you're going back to credibility and believability now, and you're kind of changing the conversation.
Yeah, interesting. So to end the 7 R's, you also have one more. Remember, which is this idea that hearts buy first. So tell me about that.
Yes. Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. That's sort of like the bonus 7th, because like the call itself is like 6, but then you need to remember that hearts buy first, which is this like bonus 7th, because this is something that like took me a long time to learn. Humans make emotional decisions and then rationalize them. Hearts buy before heads. Hearts buy first. And so this whole process at the end it's an emotional sell, and then you're helping them rationalize that. The reason why I have these AirPods Pro in is not because I did a product comparison of all 3 million comfortable noise canceling headsets on the market. It's because I knew somebody who was cool, who used AirPods Pro. It was you, John, wasn't it? But no, I knew somebody who was cool who did it, and I wanted to be cool. And then they told me that I could laser engrave an emoji on the case, and I want that.
Dang.
And so it was an emotional decision, but I rationalized it. So my wife was like, how much did you spend on those headphones? And I was like, $250, but it's a business expense, and I'm on calls all the time, and they're super comfortable, and they instantly pair with my phone, my iPad, and my MacBook. That is how you rationalize an emotional purchase.
How do you like push on that or bring that up? I guess if I'm sort of maybe I'm at that last level of objection, right? Like, well, Tuesdays are pretty busy for me. I don't know if I can make Tuesdays work.
Well, you just have to keep coming back to emotional. So sometimes it'll turn into a logical sale where somebody's asking you a bunch of questions and like, okay. Oh, so here's a common thing that comes up, right? So someone's like, all right, I've got all the details, I've got all the facts, right? So it's like, I know it starts on September 12th at 3 p.m. and it's $1,000 a month. And here's what I'm going to get. I know how many people are in the program. Okay, let me just take that list of details and bullets and go sit down with my wife and go over the decision. Which what they just said was like, I'm going to go discuss a logical, rational purchase. But humans make emotional decisions first. So that situation, I'll say like, of course, talk to your spouse. I would do the same thing. I encourage you to have the conversation with your spouse if you do want to earn $10,000 per month, group coaching 90 minutes per week, and just let me know. And so what I've done is I've brought it back to the promise, which is the emotional hook of, and so that's the conversation. So then they go to their spouse and they say like, hey, honey, thinking about joining this program. It costs $1,000 a month, but it can help me earn $10,000 per month, group coaching 90 minutes per week. And she's like, sold, done. Like, especially when I mentioned, in my case, it's also like, I have this like, I have 100% ROI guarantee that I'll keep coaching you for free until you hit that threshold. And so that's a huge selling point for people too. That's a whole other conversation. I don't think everybody has to have that. That's a very high bar for a guarantee. But like, that's an emotional guarantee, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's meant to provide a sense of safety and security, because I know really what we're trying to do is we're trying to make an emotional sale. And so don't try to logic your customer into buying your program, because it'll be a waste of time and energy.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me, you mentioned this in the book, but like, and you said you kind of gave it a name and then sort of constructed the book, but you've done a couple hundred of these, and you did a lot of research.
Yeah, I think I stopped counting, but I kind of estimate now that we're almost at 250 that I've done. Okay. Yep. So it's a lot of serve calls. I mean, not like in a year, right? It's over like multiple years. And at this point, I've had multiple clients who've used them to build 6 or 7 figure businesses off of it. So it's like, that's when I knew it was time to write a book. I was like, okay, this is working.
Yep. And you got the data to show that it works. Yeah. People follow the framework. That's great. I love it. Cool. Well, remind me again, we'll put it in the notes. If somebody wants to read the book, you're offering the book for free. So where do we go?
Please do. Go to servetosellbook.com/leadmore is the name of the show. And you'll have an opportunity there. Of course, you can always, like if you go to servetosellbook.com without the lead more, then it just takes you straight to Amazon. You can buy the book. You can look at all the amazing reviews for it, which is fun. That's what I do when I go to that link. But you can also just get a free copy of the ebook, because I don't want anything to stand in the way of you just implementing this right away. So check it out. I hope it's useful for you.
And I always like to ask my guests at Lead More. I kind of have an inkling what yours might be, but what's your superpower, John? What's the thing you think you do better than anybody else? My wife and I often joke, like if I was like an Avenger, like in the Avengers, like my superpower would be I'm really good at reading instructions. So that's it. That's it. Like I'm really good at it. And when they aren't there, clearly written, I write them. So that's basically what Serve to Sell is. It's the book. It's the instruction manual that I wish I had when I started doing this myself. But like, to use a real anecdote of how this shows up, like when we have friends over, I make the best popcorn, John, the best you've ever had. And people are always like I don't say anything. I just hand them popcorn. They're like, this is amazing. What did you do? And I show them where I read the instructions on the back of the kind that, not the kind you cook in a microwave, the kind you cook on a stove. Okay. Yeah.
On the back of the bag, they have instructions that no one ever reads on how to make the perfect popcorn. And I did, and I do. And so that's my superpower.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the show, John. Love your expertise and love learning from you, and looking forward to learning more.
Thank you, John. It's my pleasure. Keep up the good work.
All right. That was John Meese here on the Lead More podcast. Thanks, John, for that conversation, your time. I've really loved adapting this framework. I'm still early in my journey, just a few tweaks to what I used to do, but I'm excited to keep pushing on this and see where it goes for me and my business at Lead More. And I hope you listeners can use this as well. So, as you know, Lead More is now also in video form. You can go to youtube.com/JohnTMeyer_ and subscribe to watch the YouTube version to see John and see his book. Or you can listen wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple. Go there, click subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and say, why you like the Lead More podcast. Why do you keep listening to, or who was your favorite guest? All of that helps people find these episodes. So thank you as always for listening. To all the leaders out there, take care and be well.